This is the Cast Pulse podcast, where we talk with the people shaping the future of agriculture through science and innovation. I'm Carlos Beck Viana, Director of Marketing and Communications at the Council for Agricultural Science and Technology, CAST. In this episode, we're looking ahead to new research, new collaborations, and the next generation of voices in agricultural science. We'll start with Austin Gallings, who's helping lead a CAST paper on how precision agriculture is reducing spray drift and changing the way technology is used in the field. Then, Anna Gore, CAST liaison for the upcoming paper Proteins in a Balanced Human Diet. She will share how collaboration and clear communication bring science to the table. And finally, Mikayla Dycus, one of the 2024 CAST Science Communication Scholarship recipients. She will join us to talk about her research and to help spotlight the 2025 scholarship, a $1,000 award now open for applications at cast-science.org. You're listening to New Papers, New Voices, and the Next Generation episode of the Cast Pulse podcast. Our first conversation takes us to the field, where precision agriculture continues to transform how farmers manage crop protection. To talk about how these advances are helping reduce spray drift and improve efficiency, Kaylee Kleitch, Programs and Engagement Manager at CAST, and I spoke with Austin Gallings, Technology Stewardship Manager at the Agricultural Equipment Manufacturers Association and Chair of the upcoming CAST paper, Spray Drift Reduction as a Result of Established Precision Ag Technologies.
Austin, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, so actually grew up in southeastern Wisconsin on my family farm, where I'm talking with you guys from today. The farm's been in our family. I'm the seventh generation to live on the farm. We primarily raise 20,000 chickens a year and hay and forage. So that's really where my love and passion for agriculture started, with that being the lifeblood of my family for so many generations and continuing into the future. Kind of professionally, I started my career out with a company called Generac Power Systems, doing marketing on the home standby generator side. So I actually started outside the industry, but after doing some work there, I really found myself kind of longing to give back to the industry and missing farming and being able to touch that. And that's when the opportunity to join AEM kind of came forward. So joined AEM about 5 years ago. So February of 2020, which was a fun and interesting time to start with an organization as somebody new. I had about 3 weeks with AEM, 2 of them traveling before they said we were going to work from home for 2 weeks. 2 weeks turned into a year and a half. But we all made it, and we all figured out a new way of working in those times. And so started my career with AEM as the manager of agricultural services, and now serve as the senior director of agriculture for the association. I'm working with all of our members that manufacture the equipment used on farms today to really address the needs and help put tools in the toolboxes of farmers to do what they need to do to feed and power the world.
So, do you think you could tell us a little bit about what precision agriculture actually is?
It's using our inputs in a more precise manner. So leveraging technology and data and various other insights to be able to, apply what we want, where we want it, using those 4R principles of right place, right time, right substance, right rate. And even now some folks are expanding that to other things like right height and right speed and those types of things as well, but ultimately making sure that we're getting what we want, where we want it, when we want it, and need it. And yet leveraging data as well as a source and a tool to help inform us of that. And instead of now looking at a field, as just one generic plot of land, we can subdivide that field up into multiple different areas and be prescriptive in meeting the needs of those different areas to really maximize yields while being as efficient as we can with those inputs that we're putting out to the field.
Could you tell us a little bit about the history of precision agriculture and how it's evolved to where we're at right now?
Yeah, it's certainly been a journey. You can go all the way back to the mid to late 90s when auto steer first started to come out, right? Just helping to make sure that we were within the field where we needed to be. And it's continued to evolve over the last handful of years, and we're really in a period of substantial growth, and that's largely being driven by the data side of things. We went from auto steer to then different types of machine specific automated functions, whether that be boom height control or section control. And then you start to pair that with something like a variable rate application, and you start to piece all of these together. And that's all suddenly how you find yourself with something like a targeted application where we can put mount cameras on a boom and identify weeds in a field and target those weeds specifically. That's not something that just happened overnight. That's been a continuous journey and evolution of the industry and the technology that we're using. And it's just a culmination of all of that journey, going from boom height control to adding in section control to adding in variable rate application and all of those different things, and really then culminating in something like a targeted application.
Why is precision agriculture important in today's agricultural system?
It's important for a number of reasons, and I like to start with both the economic side of things as well as the environmental side of things. In agriculture, farmers operate on margins, and a lot of operations operate on fairly slim margins. And so it's how can we improve the farmer's bottom line and improve those margins? And precision agriculture is a means to do that, right? If you're applying less and being more efficient with your inputs and only using what you need and where you need it, that saves the farmer money, right? That's less substance being applied onto a field. It's maximizing yields and really maximizing that on-farm efficiency. And at the same point as well, when you're doing those things as well, making sure you're putting things where it needs to be when it needs to be there, that's great for the environment. So there's not a trade-off there. It's we're benefiting the whole ecosystem of stakeholders, from the farmer to the community, and creating a system that works for everybody and addresses the needs of everybody in a time where we need to continue to find ways to support our farmers, as well as continue to find ways to increase conservation efforts and minimize impact on the environment.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the actual technologies, what sorts of technologies there are out there, and maybe what's coming in the future?
Yeah. It's an exciting, like I said, it's an exciting time to be in agriculture, and that the pace of innovation is just increasing, and we continue to find and provide farmers with more tools in their toolbox. And I like to put it that way because there's no one true silver bullet in terms of a technology that's just going to be applied to everybody and fix all the, address every concern that exists, but rather all of these technologies and solutions that come about as a tool in a toolbox for a farmer to pick from based off of their operation and their specific needs. The needs of my family farm differs just from the farm down the road, and differs from a farm in California or New York or Florida or wherever. And so continuing to find different solutions. And so whether that be, just the leveraging of data and implementing data-driven insights, both from being able to gather that data, but then process and package that data in a way that makes sense and is easy for the farmer to drive and derive those insights, because that's the other part of this as well. Farmers just want to farm, so we've got to make these things easy to implement, easy to leverage, and easy to utilize. So whether it's from that side or whether it's putting in place either aspects of automation, whether that's through boom height control, section control, or even a targeted application, or going to full autonomy, where maybe we don't need somebody in the physical seat of the machine, but they can rather monitor it, and we're increasing the efficiency and use of folks' time, and allowing farmers to affording them more time either to put into their operation or improve quality of life, and that you're not tied to the farm 24/7. Maybe you can take a little bit of a break every now and then. So there are multiple facets of technology and precision agriculture, but they all go towards providing and putting those tools in the toolbox to improve their on-farm efficiency in their operation, as well as their quality of life, and supporting the community around them.
So you mentioned, different areas, different states, different facets. What type of farmers do you see using precision agriculture technology the most? Is there a certain trend in different crops or regions that you know of?
That's the wonderful thing about the way this technology is coming forward, in that it's really scalable and applicable to everybody, whether that's through a full new piece of machinery, or the ability to retrofit your machine to incorporate those aspects of precision agriculture into maybe an older piece of machinery. Whether and there are multiple types of technology that you can do that with, from a targeted application to even now there are some companies doing that with autonomy and various levels of automation. And so it's really scalable across the board. And there are, of course, segments where maybe they're pushing forward a little bit more based off of the need. Autonomy is a really good example in that you're seeing a lot of autonomy happen in that specialty crop space. But then maybe you look at something like a targeted application, and there's a lot of great stuff happening there for the row crop space. But it's also starting to bleed together, and you're seeing aspects of that across paths as well, whether that's autonomous tillage systems or variable rate orchard sprayers, right? And so it's certainly cross pollinating. While one segment of the industry may be a little bit further ahead, really it's scalable across all the various types of operations. And like I mentioned, whether that's through a new piece of machinery or the ability to retrofit, it isn't dependent on farm size. There's normally a solution available that works for everybody. It's just a matter of what fits within that operation and that operation's capabilities and needs to make that work.
Do you think you could expand a little bit more on the spray application technology?
100%. There, as I mentioned before, there are a number of solutions available. Some have been in the market longer than others, and they're all tools in the toolbox. And you're going to hear me say that almost ad nauseum, right? I'm going to say it a lot because I really want to emphasize that it's all based off of what's going to work best for that farm and that operation, whether that's starting with something like pulse width modulation to direct inject through or variable rate application, section control, boom height control. These are all technologies that have maybe been established and around for a little bit. The market penetration varies, where we're at on that adoption curve. And I always like to highlight those technologies because they're important, vital technologies that still we can improve the utilization and adoption of those throughout the industry. But looking ahead too, you've got that targeted application where we can utilize those cameras to pinpoint and apply directly onto the weed. But of course too, that's all dependent on weed density and pressure and those types of things as well. But I think when we look towards the future, where are we headed? I think the big common theme, no matter what technology you're talking about, whether that's spray application or other parts of the operation as well, is that data, the ability to not only gather that data. We've been doing that for a long time within agriculture, but how do we take that data and, like I mentioned before, package that and interpret that data and glean some useful insights that the farmer can easily leverage and increase that efficiency on their operation. And I think that's the next frontier, is creating a better understanding of that data and being able to use something maybe like AI to process that data and glean insights from that data and provide the farmer with a ready-made recommendation, maybe in the field while they're out there doing their spray pass or planting or whatever that may be. That's really the next frontier. Now, of course, there are challenges with that, and then that may be a long way off. But we're already seeing aspects of that incorporated into some of the technology and operations as well.
So, what do you see happening in the future? I know that you've mentioned, looking forward a few times, but what are you most excited about in the years to come?
Really just the evolution of technology. And we can talk about where we think the industry is going to go today in terms of data and targeted application. But I think the most exciting thing is what's going to come about that we're not thinking of and we can't even wrap our heads around yet, right? I mean, you look at something like autonomy and you go back, however many years, I don't think that was something that was really on the forefront of a lot of folks' minds. But all of a sudden something like that comes around, and it changes the way we do things and we approach things. And you can look at everyday examples like the cell phone and the laptop. And I mean, you go back to the 70s, I don't know that people were thinking we could do interviews and they didn't even know what a podcast would be, right? And so what's most exciting is what's going to come about. And I think when we talk about our industry, obviously the current state of things, there's a lot that's going on, but a reason for optimism looking forward is that there's so much exciting things happening in our industry, and the pace at which they're happening is only increasing. I like to compare this time period that we're in of agriculture is similar to the transition from the horse to the tractor, right? It was a revolutionary piece of technology that changed the way farmers were able to operate and scale their operations. And I think we're in another period of that. And so it's definitely an exciting time.
What was the motivation behind the paper?
Obviously a big topic of conversation right now, especially in the regulatory space, is spray drift. And how do we mitigate spray drift and continue to try to make sure that we're reducing that offsite movement and applying whatever it is that we're applying in the field where it's meant to be. And technology is a means to do that. And we've come a very long way in terms of, I highlighted a bunch of technologies and I listed them off maybe really quickly at various points, in our conversation. But all of those technologies go towards reducing that offsite movement and making us more accurate in terms of where we're placing our applications. But there hasn't necessarily been an effort to consolidate all of that information and package it in a way where we can effectively communicate that. And so I think that this is really going to be a great step towards helping us do that and helping us communicate as an industry the role technology can play in that drift mitigation. We all can infer it, and we all know it's there, and we know that it exists, and technology does that. But providing folks and informing folks with the data and insights to back that up as well, I think is key to both validate what we're saying and provide that trust in it as well.
Wonderful. And again, don't worry if you have to repeat yourself, but what should people expect from this paper considering the authors that were recruited? And so what people should be looking for when they read this paper?
I think you're going to get what you're going to see from this paper is an accurate middle of the road viewpoint on the role that technology can play in spray and drift mitigation, and some actual numbers to back that up, referencing the fantastic work that's been done in this space. But really, to be able to then read this paper and walk away with an understanding of how technology is reducing spray drift and the role that it can play, and what technologies can play a role in, and understanding, though, while one technology may have a bigger impact, how they all come together to have this holistic impact. And again, tying it back to that common theme throughout this whole conversation of being a tool in the toolbox to help a farmer based off of the needs of their operation, and providing them with this whole essentially menu of options based off of how their operation works, knowing what they want to do in terms of and need to do in terms of mitigation and so on, being able to choose which technologies are going to make sense and fit best within their operations.
Could you speak a little bit about some of the challenges the industry is facing right now?
Yeah, I think, in terms of technology and just the overall industry, I think number one, we're in a time of uncertainty. And so how can we provide our producers with a stable environment for them to be able to make these decisions and help find different ways to help mitigate that risk as well. Any operation, especially in times like where we are, incorporating any type of risk into an operation, and any change is a risk, right? When you're operating on margins, how can we mitigate that risk for the farmer so that they can take these chances to incorporate technology, and from a more technology focused kind of standpoint as well. Talked a lot about data and the ability to use and leverage data. That data is only as good as our ability to access it. And so rural broadband and being able to provide that coverage to be able to both offload and upload that machine data as well, so we can glean these insights and leverage it, is going to be another key obstacle to overcome. That's a conversation we've been having for a long time. Rural broadband, we've taken a lot of great steps to continue to figure that out and address that, but it continues to be an issue. And it's something that all of us within the industry are working with our stakeholders to address as well.
That was Austin Gallings, chair of the CAST's upcoming paper, Spray Drift Reduction as a Result of Established Precision Ag Technologies. More information about this publication will be announced soon. Our next conversation looks at how science and communication come together in nutrition. Kelly Kleitch, Programs and Engagement Manager at CAST, sat down with Anna Gore, Executive Director of the Minor Use Foundation and CAST Liaison for the upcoming paper, Proteins in a Balanced Human Diet.
To start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, your academics, and how you got to where you are right now.
I'm the Executive Director of the Minor Use Foundation. My background really is in agriculture and international development. I've always been interested in agriculture as a way to bring about change and transformation within communities, and I've always been really interested in sort of investing my career and trying to help people improve their lives. So when I finished college, I worked in a community health center, and then I lived abroad in Peru in a rural community where I kind of got my first exposure to agriculture, and I saw how adopting technology and making improvements to the way people do agriculture really can transform a community, can transform outcomes for people's well-being. And so I was there for about a year, and then I came back and I did graduate school at George Washington University for international development. There's a program in their political science school specifically for international development. And so I focused there on maternal child health and nutrition. And then when I graduated, I went to work at a foreign policy think tank called the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which does a lot of policy analysis. And I worked in the Global Food Security Project there, where I was kind of analyzing USAID programming. USAID at that time had a really big flagship initiative for food security and nutrition called the Feed the Future Initiative. So I worked analyzing the program design and implementation for Feed the Future, and then I joined USDA in the Foreign Agricultural Service. And I became aware of FAS, or the Foreign Agricultural Service, through my work at CSIS, where I was doing a lot of, as I mentioned, sort of policy analysis work. And I learned of this agency that does kind of really deep technical capacity building projects. So on things that many people might not be aware of, but things that are critical for food supply chains and exporting and production, maybe like aflatoxin or cold chain supply, cold chain storage along the supply chain, or pesticide residue levels, which is what I ended up focusing on and working a lot at USDA. We also did work on additives, many different sort of technical, what we call sanitary and phytosanitary, or SPS, barriers for agriculture. That's what I did at USDA. I also did a lot of work on trade, working on trade negotiations and the technical aspects of trade policy and the WTO, and then also a lot of capacity building projects that were more in the international development area. And at that time, the Minor Use Foundation was just being stood up. The foundation was formed in 2018, and we began our first project in 2019. That was, during my time at USDA, and I was kind of aware of some of the work that was going on through the foundation, but wasn't heavily involved, and then kind of became more and more interested in it. And when they ultimately decided to hire a staff person to manage the day-to-day operations, I was really interested in that role. I wanted to join a nonprofit and see how a small organization could grow and develop. And I also really believed in the work that the foundation was doing. I think that it's, in a very practical and meaningful way, helping growers around the world. And the model is really interesting to me, and I find it really innovative. So about a little over 3 years over 3 years ago, I left the USDA and I joined the Minor Use Foundation and have been there since.
So you mentioned a little bit about the Minor Use Foundation and some of their goals and priorities and things, but can you tell us, if a listener has never heard of Minor Use Foundation before, what exactly is it?
I think a lot of people can be a little confused by the name, as well as this concept is a bit abstract. Like I said, we work in very technical projects. So for many people, pesticide residues aren't like something they think about in their daily life or necessarily have a good understanding of. But the way I like to think about it is, these minor crops, fruits and vegetables and nuts, and spices too. They suffer from a lot of pest and disease pressures, especially in the tropical regions of the world, where there's a lot of humidity and heavy disease pressures. But they don't have tools to address those pest and disease pressures. So they don't have registered pesticides or biopesticides, or the things that they do have registered are, very old technologies. I mean, things that we don't use in the US anymore or in many other countries around the world, but they're the only they're the only fungicides or insecticides that are registered for those commodities. So growers are working with a really kind of incomplete set of tools. And a lot of times then they're just using things off label. They're just experimenting with what will work. And, that's not the way pesticides are really designed to be used. They're designed to be used strictly according to the label, and they're heavily regulated for that purpose. So that's what we do, is we try to help get the most modern and safe tools registered for specialty crops so that growers around the world can have access to them. And pesticide companies, they're not doing anything wrong. They're focusing on trying to get the tools registered for the crops that are most heavily grown around the world, like rice and wheat and corn. So they're focusing on those markets, but there's no monetary incentive or nobody who's currently looking out for those kind of smaller crops. So that's the work that we do.
So recently, Marine Use Foundation hosted a webinar alongside CAST. Can you talk a little bit about that and tell us a little bit about the topic and everything?
So in our foundation, we have a relatively small team and a relatively small budget. Our budget is just over $1 million a year. So we can only take on a small number of projects, maybe 10, 12, 15 projects maximum. So we have to be really careful about which projects we choose to take on. And the way we do that, we want it to be a stakeholder-driven approach. We don't necessarily want to be choosing which commodities we're going to be working in. We want to know where's the biggest demand and where are the biggest problems around the world, and be working kind of from a bottom-up approach. So every few years, we undertake what's called a priority setting process, where we try to crowdsource that information. We try to get as many inputs as possible from stakeholders around the world to understand where there are the biggest pest and disease burdens and for specialty crops. And then we take that information, we analyze it, we work with the crop protection industry to try to understand where there are solutions available that could be effective for these problems, and really understand what is the nature of the problem. Do they just need some data to get a pesticide registered? Is it a little bit more complicated than that? Is there actually a faster way that we could help the grower? Maybe there's something else that they could use that they might not be aware of. So we try to kind of do some due diligence. And then in the end, we come up with a list of, here are the key areas we're going to be working on going forward, based on those needs that we received, based on the solutions that are available, and based on our own internal analysis of where we have resources that could actually make a difference and address the problem. So the recent webinar that we had with CAST, and we were really grateful for the opportunity to partner with CAST on this event, was to share the outcomes of that process. So I did a presentation sort of walking through from the beginning, all the steps that we took to the end, and then what we found and what our work plan is going to look like going forward. If you didn't have a chance to watch the webinar, but you're interested in seeing the discussion and what the outcomes were of the process, then you can find it on CAST's website, on CAST's YouTube channel, and also on the Minor Use Foundation website as well.
Okay, so looking forward on some of the topics that you discussed during the webinar, the topics that you touched on just now, are you optimistic for the future, or do you have any concerns that you'd like to talk about, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic for the future. We've been really gratified going through this priority setting process that so many stakeholders were willing to participate. They took the time to fill out our form. Some of them filled it out many, many times, took the time to share 15, 20 or more priorities with us. The crop protection industry as well was very happy to partner with us and to be part of it. They have very busy day jobs that don't include doing this work, but they were, taking days to meet with us. We did 2 to 3 day meetings with most of the crop protection, the bigger crop protection companies and some of the others as well, to better understand where do they have solutions, because they really want it. This is a problem that they care about and they want to try to help solve. So I think we have a really supportive community, and our role at the foundation is to try to connect all those pieces to try to affect some change. But I feel really optimistic that with the inputs that we got, we're going to have a really good set of projects and increased impact over the next few years. And ultimately, that makes me optimistic for the problems that we're trying to solve and the growers we're trying to support.
That was Anna Gore, guest liaison for the upcoming paper, Proteins in a Balanced Human Diet. More information about this publication will be announced soon. Our final conversation brings us to the next generation of agricultural scientists and communicators. Mikayla Dycus is one of the 2024 CAS Science Communication Scholarship recipients, an award that recognizes outstanding student communicators in agriculture with a $1,000 scholarship and national recognition. She joined me to share her research, her journey in science communication, and her advice for students who may want to apply for the 2025 scholarship, now open at cast-science.org. Mikayla, let's start with your story. What first sparked your interest in this research area?
So I grew up on a second generation poultry and cattle farm in Northwest Georgia. I came into undergrad as an animal science major with the intention of going to vet school. And then I started doing undergrad research in both the monogastric and ruminant nutrition labs here at the Animal Dairy Science Department at the University of Georgia. And I just fell in love with research. As soon as I started, I knew this is what I would like to do the rest of my life. And through that undergrad research, I met my current professor, Dr. Jefferson Lorenzo. So I study microbiome, bioinformatics. And before I met him, I didn't know what bioinformatics was. I went from not being proficient in Excel to, doing coding. So I really learned a lot, and I'm in an area that I never thought I would be, but I really enjoy it and I really love it.
Could you walk us through your research in a way that other students can relate to? What's your focus and what are you hoping to discover?
So for my research, I look at the gastrointestinal microbiome and how it relates to feed efficiency in ruminant animals. And so by ruminants, I mean cattle, sheep, deer, etc., that have a rumen stomach chamber, and in their gastrointestinal tract, they have a very dense microbial ecosystem that allows them to degrade otherwise undegradable or unpalatable feedstuff. Past research has shown that this dense microbial ecosystem can be influenced, or it can influence phenotypic traits such as feed efficiency, meat quality, animal health, etc. And then also past research has also unveiled how more feed efficient animals produce less methane, which is a byproduct of fermentation. So the overarching goal of my research is to kind of unveil this very complex interaction between the host and their microbial community and how it affects feed efficiency in specific. So the objective was, in my study, was to capture the entire Angus cattle population in the United States so that we can really get a true idea of kind of what is a good microbiome. So we had the unique opportunity to travel to seven different states. So we went to California, Iowa, Montana, Kansas, Nebraska, West Virginia, and of course, Georgia. So we visited feed efficiency testing centers there. And so each of the animals in my study has individual feed intake data. So we know each animal's level of efficiency. And then at those farms, we collected gastrointestinal microbiome samples, so from the rumen and from the hindgut. Back at the lab, we then extracted the DNA from those samples and then sequenced the genetic code so that we can look at the correlations between the gastrointestinal microbiome and each animal's feed efficiency. So in the end, all this research, we really hope to make progress in cattle microbiome research, of course, but also to decrease feed input costs for producers and then also enhance the environmental sustainability in the beef sector.
You mentioned developing new technical skills along the way. What other skills have you gained through research, and which ones do you think are most valuable for other students to build?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about here, at least like your soft skills. So, like how you interact with other people. And for me, I think gaining skills in both communication and leadership would be like the two skills that I feel like I have gained. And I think that other students should as well. Whenever I talk about communication, obviously it's important to communicate your research, and that's, I feel like, what CAST is all about, but also like communicating with other graduate students and with your professor. So I think in order to be productive, you have to be good at communicating, and also have to be like good at clarifying like your expectations with your professor. And so graduate research is a community, it's collaborative. So I think if you don't communicate well with others, then it could hurt your success. And then, like, to be a good leader, you also have to be an effective communicator. For leadership, I am the president of our Graduate Student Association here in our department. And with that, it has really taught me how to work well with others and how to communicate. And I've gotten to work with other professors, our department head, and really just lead initiatives that hopefully make graduate school better for everyone.
Graduate research can be very demanding. How do you find balance between your research and your other academic responsibilities?
That's something I feel like I do better at some days than others. What I like to do is like set attainable goals for myself each week and like physically write them down. So then whenever I complete that task, I can physically mark it off and feel accomplished. As I've gotten older, I've gotten better at it. But I mean, I feel like that's just something that everyone will be trying to figure out their entire lives.
Looking ahead, what emerging trends in your field should students pay attention to?
I think they should be aware of the use of like artificial intelligence and precision livestock and machine learning models. Like advancements in these technologies like have the ability to like enhance our animal management practices, for example, using like the collection of data. And no, ChatGPT has been a huge thing. I use it, but it's also a thing that you need to be careful of and do your own research and not just trust what the AI says.
What has been your biggest challenge so far, and what did it teach you?
So I think my biggest challenge is adapting to things when they don't go as I had them planned in my head. We work with animals, so a lot of times things happen that are out of our control. And at first it was a big challenge for me to like adapt and tell myself that everything will work out, even if it's not exactly how I had it planned. As graduate students, we're all in school, we're all in a learning environment, and it's okay to make mistakes. And I wish I could just go back to myself a couple years ago and tell myself that.
Let's talk about the CAST Science Communication Scholarship. As one of last year's recipients, what advice would you give to students who are thinking about applying?
Okay, yeah, I would just say just go for it. The CAST Scholarship was an incredible opportunity for me, and I think it strengthened both those communication and those leadership skills that I talked about earlier. And when applying, just write about your passions. All of us students, we're all very different from one another. We have different backgrounds. We all study different topics. We all are in different stages of grad school. So your passions is what makes you unique, and it feels good to write about them too.
That was Mikayla Dycus, one of the 2024 CAST Science Communication Scholarship recipients. Applications for the 2025 CAST Science Communication Scholarship, a $1,000 award honoring excellence in communicating agricultural science, are now open at cast-science.org. The recipient will be recognized during the Borlaug CAST Communication Awards ceremony on December 2nd, 2025 in Washington, D.C. You've been listening to the CAST Pulse podcast. For updates on upcoming papers, webinars, and scholarship opportunities, and everything related to CAST, visit cast-science.org, follow us on social media at CastAgScience, and also follow us on Spotify. I'm Carlos Beck-Viana, Director of Marketing Communications at CAST. Thanks for tuning in.